the 6th of March. We are in the Ides of March now, but with us tonight is a very special guest that I got to hear from. I was very fortunate a few weeks ago at a Republican Party event, and she is Rebecca Friedrichs, who has quite a story to tell and is the leader of a movement that is seeking really to change not only how people view our education system, but also to stand up and make it happen. She was the plaintiff, I think that's probably the right term, in the Friedrichs versus California Teachers Association Supreme Court case, which we'll tell the story in a minute what happened, because it was famous, and it actually led directly to the Janus case that we all know about now with regard to public employee unions. She's the founder and president of forkidsandcountry.org, where you can get a ton of information. And we'll talk more about that, of course, about how to deal with the circumstance, how to make change in this system, which we all know desperately needs it for the kids. Yes, actually for the kids. And she's the author of Standing Up to Goliath, which is a really an excellent book that tells the story of how not only how she first got to the point where she was standing up to the Goliath, which is the teachers unions, but also what she learned along the way and can share with all of us. Welcome to the show, Rebecca.
It's so great to be here, Kevin. Thank you.
So this, why don't we launch into, how you first emerged on the stage here when you were teaching, and remind me off the top of my head, and I have the bio here so I could pull that up. You and your husband are both teachers. You taught for 28 years,
Yep.
which is quite a long time, and amazing, because you look so young that I wouldn't even associate 28 years of working with you at all.
God
But
bless you.
but I have to say that that's an enormous amount of experience. And then, of course, you mentioned in your about your husband Charles, who also was a teacher, and but you were learning from the inside. You were even involved with the union yourself, right? And then, lo and behold, you started having some issues with what was going on, and started to push back. Why don't you tell kind of that the onset of that story?
Sure. Well, I actually had issues with the union from day one. When I was a student teacher, I witnessed a teacher manhandling little kids, and she'd scream in their faces and yank them. And everybody's seen an abusive teacher like that. They don't belong in the classroom. They don't belong being around little kids, but there she was. And when I went to my master teacher to ask what to do about it, she told me that it was the teacher union that was defending this lady, and that it was almost impossible for school districts to get rid of these types of teachers. And the kids were just out of luck. And it was all because of the unions. So from day one, I had a problem with the unions. But when I signed my first contract as a teacher, that's when I discovered that you had to pay the unions as a condition of employment. So I didn't have a choice. I couldn't break free of them. I had to fund them. So or I didn't teach. So my entire career, 28 years, my husband's entire 42-year career, we both were forced to fund against our wills a private organization that has been destroying our profession, has been destroying the children, destroying our schools in America and in other countries. And we thought that was wrong. So throughout my entire career, I always pushed back. I always questioned. But about, I don't remember what year it was, maybe 2007, 2008. I remember it was during the Obama administration. I actually stepped up as a union rep because I was forced to pay these people and I had no voice. So I thought, my friends and I, none of us agree with what they're doing. We don't like the way they treat us. We don't like the fact they're spending our dues on politics, only far left radical politics, which none of us in the teachers lounge agreed with what they were doing. We would look at their magazines on how to vote and we would laugh. Even our union president would laugh. Oh yeah, I use that as a guide on how not to vote. So none of us agreed with what they were doing, but we're all forced to fund them, right? So I decided I'm going to become a union rep. So I served as a union rep for 3 years. I was on the executive board of my local. I served as the secretary, and I started going to state level union leadership meetings. And that's when my eyes were really open. What I found out was these people are not really a teachers union. They don't really represent teachers. They aren't really a union in the traditional sense. I call them an education mafia. And the reason I call them that is they take money from all these people who don't want to pay it. They spend all that money pushing radical politics that are literally destroying the United States of America. And I mean, you wonder where all this horrible stuff that's going on, including the Biden administration. This education mafia put him into office, put Obama into office, and a lot of people into office, like Newsom in my state, who are damaging our constitutional free republic, really just destroying our liberties. So, and sexualizing our children. So when I became a union rep and I started attending these meetings, I was just stunned. First of all, my husband and I went to the first meeting together, and we walked in at the expo area, and we thought we were at the wrong conference because every single table was some far left political agenda, like Gelson, Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, or Planned Parenthood, or we had been to a lot of teacher conferences. They always had things for sale, like that you'd use to teach, like manipulatives for mathematics or science lab products, or, you know, my husband's music teacher, music books, whatever. Nothing like that. It was all far left radical politics. And so we said, oh, you know, we must be in the wrong place. Where's the teacher union meeting? They said, you're in the right place. This is it. And we were shocked. And so we were escorted up to these fancy parties where they were serving really expensive things like caviar and open bar. And we thought, they're doing this off the backs of teachers who are, you know, not making the huge salaries. These people were living a limousine lifestyle off the backs of teachers. So that's what we saw. Got fully bullied there, totally shut down. And the story I like to tell people the most is I'm in a room of like 300 teachers, and this one teacher had the courage to stand up during Q&A. There were National Education Association leaders and California Teacher Association leaders up on the stage, and they said, hey, it's time for Q&A. We want to give you a voice. So, you know, ask us any questions you want. This brave teacher stands up and she goes, I'm here representing the teachers in my district somewhere in California. And she said, we're really upset that our dues money is being spent on politics. How do we gain a voice? How can we stop our money being spent on politics? Those union leaders, not only did they bully her from the stage, but a bunch of them came around her and, you know, stood around her like thugs and just intimidated her. And the people from the stage, including Lily Eskelsen Garcia, the former president, she was VP at that time of the NEA, they told her that our politics are the right politics. If you don't agree with us, there's something wrong with you. And they shut her down so completely that all 300 teachers in that room got dead silent. I knew everyone around me. I knew their politics. I knew that most of them were Christians. They were conservatives. They were upset with what was going on. They were glad this lady asked the question, but all of them had their heads down in total defeat. Nobody said a word, including myself. And I'll forever be sorry that I didn't stand up for that lady. But that was one of the straws that broke the camel's back for me, that where I discovered these people aren't for teachers. They're not for, I already knew they weren't, but now I had more hard evidence that they were just there to use teachers as pawns and to gain access to vulnerable children through the teaching profession. So I started fighting them at that point. There's more to the story, but basically at that point, I stepped down as a union leader. I wrote a letter to my local, and they completely understood. They respected me. I was a great teacher, and they always respected me until I sued the unions. But they, you know, I wrote them a letter. I said, hey, I can't put up with this. These people are bullies. They're not listening to what the teachers want. And they agreed with me. And I said, they're funding things like Planned Parenthood. I can't stand behind that with my, you know, even though I'm forced to pay them, I can't agree with this. And so I left. What I did was become what's called a fee payer. You weren't allowed to not pay them, but you didn't have to be a member. So I was a non-member, still paying them a ton in fees. And but I started writing editorials against them in my local newspaper. I just kept reading all these editorials that the unions are so great. Yeah, they were all written by union, you know, people who were union bosses or being paid by the unions. And so I just started getting the real voice of great teachers out there, that these people don't speak for us and they aren't who they say they are. And what was shocking, Kevin, was I didn't even know how to submit an editorial. I knew how to read them, but I had no idea how to submit one. And I sent it to letters to the editor with this lame note. And I was so embarrassed. But once they printed the first article, it was picked up by all kinds of national online outlets because
Mm,
apparently no teacher had ever spoken up against the unions before. And people were just thrilled that somebody was speaking out. So 6 months after my first editorial, I ended up being lead plaintiff in a federal lawsuit, headed to the US Supreme Court, suing National Education Association and the California Teachers Association. And the Attorney General of California at the time, Kamala Harris, intervened the entire state of California against us, as if every Californian agreed with her. And the
right.
Obama Biden administration intervened the entire United States of America against us. They literally had solicitor generals arguing against us at the US Supreme Court. So it was 10 California teachers standing against the most powerful, brutal, and I will say it, evil unions in the country and the entire nation. Power against us. So people called us David versus Goliath, and we really liked that because David won.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that as soon as somebody stood up in a meeting that they thought was supposed to be about them representing the teachers that they work with locally, found out that actually it's the other way around, isn't it? That you are expected to be indoctrinated from above by the leadership and go keep all those people in line down below. And they knew that they probably knew that there were a bunch of other teachers who felt the same way
Yeah,
in that meeting, but they had to go and completely terrorize and destroy the first person that stood up. Otherwise, they'd have a rebellion on their hands, and it worked, at least
that's a
for a
Yeah,
while.
that is exactly right. And they have been doing that for decades. The NEA was started in 1857, and they had to slowly, push their agenda into our schools. But they really got their stronghold in the 1960s. And ever since then, teachers have been bullied. I could tell you story after story. There's several in my book of teachers. One lady in particular, she's no longer with us, but in I think it was in the 60s, she was teaching in Hershey, Pennsylvania. She didn't want to join the union. None of her friends wanted to join the union. All of them joined because they were terrified. And they said, if you don't join the union, they ruin your job. So this gal, Ruth, she wouldn't join. She kept standing up. She said, they don't do anything for us. I'm not going to join. Do you know the union sent 5 men in black suits to her classroom to harass her after the students left one day? So here's this little sweet little teacher, 5 big burly men in black suits, mafia style, come bullying her to join the union. That lady was so brave, she still didn't join until they came the second time. After they came the second time, and she wasn't able to get any other teachers or administrators to stand with her, they had all caved, they'd all joined the union because they were all afraid. So then she finally joined because she didn't have anybody standing with her. And really, the moral of the story, it's what you said. I mean, if people would just stand together, this nonsense would stop. We wouldn't have ever gotten to this evil place where we're at in our schools if people wouldn't have just caved to fear and caved to these unions. So it's really time for people to stand up. Thanks to us and our lawsuit and another suit that came after ours, people don't have to pay the unions anymore. So they can leave. They can stop funding this nightmare. And I hope they will. I hope they'll start standing up together.
It's interesting that you mentioned too that uh, we try to encourage children in classrooms to stand up and have the courage of their convictions. That's what we do out of the basic character that that we all have. Is that's what we say. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, but this teachers union clearly went after you and others when you had that same courage. And I think now we see it manifesting in the schools because unless you express the correct and approved point of view that you're supposedly being taught, you will not be encouraged to have the courage of your convictions and to express it. And that's why we've seen what's happened to our schools at every level. And you, before we went on live here, you mentioned about how that was done to the university system. Well, what better place to go than to find out that your ability to think for yourself has been canceled by a speech code
Yeah.
and that they'll destroy you and because you bothered to actually have a differing opinion. What happened to debate? What happened to dialogue? What happened to people understanding things from different perspectives?
Yeah.
Well, that's what's happened to our school system. You're pointing out it started with the way the teachers union conducted itself with regard to the teachers.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm also saying factually that It's the teachers union, so that I call the education mafia. And I'm going to ask your audience to try to help me change the narrative on who they are. They have been stealing the name teacher for decades and stealing the name union to gain your trust and to gain access to your children, whom they are now pushing a sexualized agenda on and damaging in extreme levels, and exposing them to groomers and all kinds of stuff. 100% of this is pushed and funded and lobbied for by the so-called teacher unions, the education mafia. So it's not only just that they bully teachers, it's that they collect so many billions of dollars annually, and they are controlling the school system because they got the federal government involved in the school system. And this education mafia is the reason we're having all these problems in our school. It's the reason the children are being sexualized. It's the reason the schools have become war zones. It's the reason we have boys dominating girls' sports. The unions even brag about being behind boys dominating girls' sports and invading their restrooms and their locker rooms. So I know teachers here in California. Just a couple of weeks ago, a teacher got fired, a PE teacher who teaches the young ladies. She's in the locker room with the young ladies, and she said, I'm not going to go along with calling someone a different pronoun, and I'm not going to let a biological boy come into the showers where there's naked young ladies. I'm not doing it. They fired her over it. She's brave. She's standing up for what's right. Her church is standing behind her. Many people are standing behind her. We need more of that, because we have the majoritarian values, those of us who are against this nonsense.
Yeah.
It's just that we've allowed these evil people to gain control through the unions. So the sooner people can understand that it's the government unions, that's how they infiltrated our agencies and our institutions like our schools. And until we kick these government unions out, we're going to continue having these problems.
Well, in your book, actually, I've got it. People can see that here. And I put a link to where it can be purchased on Amazon. This book actually does recount so much of this so that people can understand not only what's being done and how and when it started, but how they can start to change it. And I've posted a link already, and I'll post it again, to forkidsanCountry.org, which you are they're asking people to step up and start helping adopt a teacher. Maybe you could tell us about those two things, and then once we talk about that, we'll revisit it in the end. But I'd like to also come back in a moment to the rest of the story about what happened with your lawsuit, and then what happened after that, because that's really interesting as well. So adopt a teacher and union exit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about those two things so folks can know what actions are available for them to take?
I would love to. Thanks for this opportunity. So, you know how we're all experiencing cancel culture, and that's very uncomfortable. And it's hard for people to stand alone in a cancel culture kind of situation. Think about America's teachers. Since the 1960s, we have been dominated by a mafia-like organization that calls itself a teacher union. Teachers have been under this cancel culture for decades, and it's been terrifying, and teachers have been silenced, and they're just really scared. So one of the things that people don't realize is that most teachers are 100% against the union agenda. They go into their classroom, they kind of have their blinders on, they keep their head down, they teach their students, they get out and, at the end of the day, they finish their work, and they're not involved with the union at all. They've just been forced to fund them. So
they
most
just wanted
teachers,
to teach.
Exactly. They just want to teach. And so, but they were forced to fund unions for over 40 years until the win in the Supreme Court in 2018. They were forced to fund them. Well, what the unions did during our case, and they called it the Friedrichs fix, they went around to the legislatures that they control, which is any blue state, and they passed these laws that make it impossible or illegal for any government employer to tell their employees they've been freed from forced unionism. So most of these teachers and other government employees have no idea they've been freed. They just, unless they read about it in the paper or something, they don't know. So we dreamed up something called Adopt a Teacher. It could also be called Liberate a Teacher. Help us liberate them. So we want you to put your arm around them. We have a flyer on our website, Adopt a Teacher. It literally takes 3 minutes to read it. Very simple. You just putting your arms around them, educating them. Look, I don't know if you know, but your union dues are being used to destroy our country, to harm our children, to destroy our families, take our freedoms. gosh, wish you would stop paying those unions. Did you know you don't have to pay them anymore? And so you're helping to educate them. And we have all the tools you need to do that, including my book. And we also created a movie that came out earlier this year. You can find that on our website. So we just have all the tools you need. We have something called a teacher toolkit too, that helps teachers to understand they've been lied to about a ton of stuff, and they think they're going to lose their job if they leave the union and all this scary stuff. So we have everything you need to educate them. So Adopt a Teacher is basically educate and empower these teachers. Once they get to a point of being empowered, all they have to do is click on Union Exit, and we walk them through. And this is all free of charge, by the way. So Union Exit has 3 parts. Part 1 is the teacher toolkit, where they can read and find out that all these things they've been told are lies, that it's not true they need union liability insurance. They can get superior coverage from an independent organization for a fraction of the cost.
Really?
And all of those, answers all those
Fraction of the
questions.
cost. Wow.
Fraction of the cost. Unions are charging most teachers around $1,000 annually or $1,200 annually. I know teachers paying more, $1,400 annually. And they give them this very inferior liability insurance that only defends the teacher if the teacher's sued. So if you're molesting a kid or whatever and you get sued, they're going to defend you. But if there's a job action against you, which is what happens more often, you're falsely accused, your administrator harasses you, they put you on unpaid leave, whatever, while they do an investigation on you, they falsely, come up with all these lies about you because you're actually speaking the truth. The union won't defend you in those situations. But these independent organizations that we just lead you to them, and you can buy it from them. We don't sell it. It's part of the 3 steps that we lead you to. They charge around $200 a year for this far superior coverage. And the unions only cover 1 million per incident. These folks cover 2 million per incident. So we answered those kind of questions for teachers because they really believe, because the unions have been telling them for decades that they have to have the union insurance. It's a lie. They don't need it. So we answer all those questions.
That here, by the way, I can see that. It's like Christian Educators Association of American Educators, Innovative Teachers of Texas. There's 3 options right there.
Yep, that's right. And 2 of them are national options. Christian Educators and Association of American Educators offer the exact same product. It's just one you have to be a Christian, and they have a Christian network for you. The other one you don't have to be a Christian. And then Innovative Teachers of Texas is only for teachers in Texas. They have really great coverage there too. So I mean, there's all kinds of options for teachers that have been around for a long time, and they're just better off. So step 2 on Union Exit, we actually lead teachers to an interactive map of the United States. They click on their state. All the government unions in their state pop up. They click on their union, and they fill out a form to opt out. And if they get bullied or the union says you can't leave, I beg to differ. You can leave. You have the right to leave because of the win at the U.S. Supreme Court, but they will harass some and try to make it take a really long time to get out. So we partner with an organization that has lawyers that can help with that if that situation arises. And then step 3 is getting the liability insurance if people want it. They don't have to, but if they want it, it's available to them. So this is a way of empowering teachers. They don't know that they've been freed. They don't know how to be empowered. And then the other thing about adopting a teacher is we don't want any teacher to be alone in this. If they go back to work and they get harassed every day, they're literally working in a mafia-like corrupt environment. Stand with them. Are you their friend? Walk into the classroom with them. Volunteer in their classroom. Be with them. Just stick up for them on social media when somebody bashes them, because the unions and their friends have a lot of money, and they pay for these trolls to say really nasty things to people like me who are exposing the unions. The unions give money to Media Matters. They write hit pieces on people like me. So we need to stand with our teachers so that when they get attacked like that, there's more good people coming in and saying, hey, don't treat her that way.
Yeah, beat the bad with the good.
Yes.
I mean, and that's a great way to do it. That's the best way to do it. So maybe just shifting a little bit back to the story on your court case on the Friedrichs versus California Teachers Association. I remember it pretty well because, of course, I pay attention to politics. But there's a real dramatic story about what happened. The arguments were heard, right, by the Supreme Court in what was it, the fall of 2019, right?
You are very close. So our case was heard at the U.S. Supreme Court on January 11th, 2016. 2016.
Oh, 26. Sorry, I got it wrong by 4 years. I meant because I was thinking right before the presidential year election.
It was right before the primary, which actually is kind of key. So I'll tell the story. So think about that primary, 2016 primary. That's
Right.
when Trump came out of nowhere, where there were like 17 candidates or something on the Republican ticket. And everyone thought Hillary was going to win. Well, so there were the two largest cases that year were our case, Friedrichs versus California Teachers Association, and Little Sisters of the Poor. The Little Sisters didn't want to have to pay for abortifacient drugs through Obamacare. So two big cases. When our case was heard on January 11th, everybody, including the New York Times, admitted that we won oral arguments. They knew we were going to get a 5-4 decision. Our swing vote was Justice Scalia. Scalia actually used my talking points from the bench. He actually stated to the union attorney during oral arguments, hey, you know, what these teachers are saying is that in collective bargaining, in this situation where these teachers are being paid by taxpayer dollars, and then they're paying union dues with taxpayer dollars, and then the unions are putting people into office and then bargaining across the table with people they put into office. And he said, these teachers are saying this is all political. It's 100% political. You can't say that some of it's not, because the unions were claiming like 80% of it was not political and only a little bit was political. And he said, these teachers are arguing it's all political. And the attorney on the other side admitted it. He said, yes, we agree, Your Honor. And we all were stunned. You're not
Wow.
allowed to talk in the U.S. Supreme Court. And we all went, oh, because they admitted that we were right.
It was a Washington gaffe where they accidentally speak the truth, right?
It's exactly what it was. So we all knew we won. We knew we had Scalia's vote. We knew we had a 5-4. Tragically, exactly 1 month later, on February 12th, Justice Scalia dies. I mean, who saw that coming? I never watch the news in the morning, but I was watching it, getting ready to go to lunch with my husband for Valentine's Day. And it comes on, breaking news. That's when I learned that Scalia died, watching breaking news. I sent an email to my attorneys. That's how they found out, from an email from me. Scalia died. We had no idea. Even the attorneys were like, we don't know what's precedence when this happens. Well, what we discovered was there have been a lot of cases, something like 80 cases, that have been reheard at the U.S. Supreme Court because a justice died or got sick or something. Because when the decision comes down, every justice has to be there or their vote doesn't count. So a dead man's vote doesn't count. So we knew that we weren't going to get Scalia's vote, even though we did get his vote. So we ended up getting a 4-4 tied decision, which was devastating. And we asked the court to rehear our case. They kept us on their docket to the very last day of the term. In fact, they rejected rehearing our case on my birthday, which was really key because they accepted our case on my birthday. They rejected rehearing it on my birthday. But then the Janice case ended up winning on my birthday. So my birthday was really key throughout the whole thing.
They just needed to know when your birthday was, and they had to figure it all out.
Exactly. It was pretty fun. I had actually.
You're going to have to send me what your birthday is, because if there's future things, I just want to know what date to be paying attention.
It's June 27th. And it's funny because usually the term is over before June 27th, but sometimes they take a little while. So when the Janice decision came down, term had already been over for like 4 or 5 days. And then the decision was the last one to come down. And I had actually asked God, could you please let Janice win on my birthday? I mean, we did all the work, all the developing the talking points, just the work going in to convince the court. And then to lose on a technicality because someone died, it was devastating. And Mark Janice is a good friend of mine. And, and they, of course, used our talking points and went forward. And we always tell people when we're together, Friedrichs ran the ball to the 1-yard line and Janice ran it in for a touchdown because, we got tackled by a death. So anyhow, the thing I think is very key there is that the justices had to decide whether to rehear our case or not. Yeah. And we knew that they had ruled in our favor, but then they rejected rehearing it. So we were very puzzled. And then it hit me. During that 2016 primary, everybody thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. And I didn't. I thought Trump was going to win, but the people in the know thought Hillary was going to win. And I think the justices knew that if they reheard our case and Hillary won, we would lose and it would set a bad precedent. So I think that's why they rejected it. But I think the positive was, I can't tell you how many people I have talked to during the 2016, before Trump came in and proved himself and they didn't really know who he was. A lot of people said, I plugged my nose and I voted for Trump for the court. So I think the court really helped Trump get over get the win. So that it was very key. I'm sorry that our case had to lose because of that, or get a tie because of that. But I'm very glad that Trump won.
So the
And
Lord
then
knew what he was doing, I
he
guess.
did. He
Yeah.
did exactly. And then
That's
once Trump
often
got
a good thing to remember, right?
exactly, exactly. And so once Trump got in there and he brought in a conservative justice, the Janus case went forward. And then the Janus case was heard in 2018 and won June 27th, 2018 with a 5-4 decision. So I think, the justices were smart to wait until it was a more sure thing. Even though I'm devastated, our case didn't get to get the win that day, but I'm really thankful that Mark's case went forward.
And I'm actually really thankful that the current attorney general, who's just ridiculously bad,
Oh my
and,
gosh.
and corrupt in my view, as much as he was supposed to be sort of a judicial moderate in the Democrat tradition, is not a member of the Supreme Court. And that was one of the
God.
things that
Yes.
Donald Trump ran on. He came
Yep.
out and he said, so here are the people that I'm looking at
Yep.
to nominate to the court. I think he did that during the primaries, I recall.
Yeah, I can't remember, but I do remember that he worked very closely with the Heritage Foundation and really took some good advice on, how to choose some good justices. And yeah, can you imagine if Merrick Garland was on our Supreme Court?
Yeah.
I, I was watching him the other day. He was testifying. I don't know if he knows how to tell the truth.
Yeah, he has a real problem with the truth, and he also has, I think is this his son-in-law or something, was tied in with like, is it school textbooks or
So,
something along those lines that
yes,
was
this
pushing a lot of the gender and the CRT type of stuff, and it's just like, I don't think you could write a fictional drama that people
right.
would believe that has as much crazy stuff like that as the factual real situation does with a guy like this.
Exactly. And the whole Biden administration and Clinton's and Obama's. I mean, they get away with untold corruption.
Yeah.
And the fact that they get away with it is the scariest part. We need some justice desperately here. But it's unbelievable that they're too big to be brought to justice. That's frightening. And it's pretty scary when you have an attorney general going around picking on parents, calling parents domestic terrorists, and sicking the FBI after
I
parents
know.
who are just trying to protect their children. That's pretty scary.
Yeah, and I think that it's really politically stupid too, because the one thing we know is don't mess with people's kids.
Yeah.
Because if you start doing that, then actually they're just not going to care at some point, no matter what other thing you think you've got that's going to get them to vote for you. Don't mess with their kids.
Yeah.
And it's becoming apparent that that's exactly what they've been doing for the longest time. That's what
Yes.
they've been doing.
Yes, they have. They've been pushing this agenda against our kids for a really long time. Thank God people have finally awakened to it. I think that's the silver lining from the COVID. I call it the COVID cult because there seems to be, there's so many lies around it. The only people who would believe it would have to be religious because the truth is, there's just so many lies around it. But it
Oh,
exposed what's going on in these schools, and thank God it exposed the unions. Because the teacher union had a backroom deal with the CDC to keep the schools closed and to keep the kids masked. And so finally, I mean, I've been blowing the whistle on the unions for years, and I've been trying to wake up teachers for years, and they just didn't see it. But when the unions would not defend teachers from having to get the shot, an experimental shot, and when the unions had a backroom deal to keep the kids out of school, teachers want to teach. They didn't want to be home. They weren't afraid of this nonsense. They wanted to serve the children. Good teachers. I'm not talking about the union activists. But these good teachers finally woke up. Hey, these unions are not on our side. So thank God for that. And now we need to run with it and help more people to understand and to reject these unions outright.
you're mentioning before we went live too that a number of these things really came up specifically during the Obama Biden administration and just gained all this momentum, and now we're seeing it years later manifest itself. And then I thought to myself too, there's a real problem with disruptive behavior in classrooms.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking, well, what would really be good to have is a teachers union that would go and try to make sure that classroom conditions were accommodating to teachers who want to teach. That sounds like a really great idea if you wanted to have a union looking out for working conditions. But they're not only not doing that, they're pushing the breakdown of discipline in the classrooms, where just a handful of kids can just completely ruin the learning environment for all the other kids. And we've got a state here in Oregon, and I know you guys have some of these very similar struggles. We look at the reading and math proficiency to grade level, that metric, and I just saw the other day down in Eugene, Oregon, where there's a lot of things going on nowadays, but both good and not so good. But the proficiency of the in math and reading is top 20% in Oregon, and it's in the 45 to 55% range. I'm just like, by any standard, if more than half of the kids in some cases cannot read or do math to grade level, that's a failed school.
Not only is it failed, what bothers me the most is this was done on purpose. And now I'm speaking as a 28-year public school teacher. I taught kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth grade. And I love teaching kindergarten the best because the kids would come to me. I don't care how many languages they spoke. By the end of the first few months, they were reading. By the end of the year, they were reading well. So if I could get a hold of them in kindergarten and they could all learn how to read, I loved that best, because then they were, when you're teaching fourth grade, you get, 3/4 of my students couldn't read at grade level on the first day of school. So now I'm having to catch them up. That's a lot harder than, bringing all the kids at the same level.
Yeah.
So I'm speaking from a lot of experience. This has been done by design to destroy our educational system. There is no reason, zero reason, that we should have such low math and reading scores. And I'll tell you how they did this on purpose. So, and this is the education mafia too, the so-called teachers unions. So they were in bed with a guy named John Dewey, not the Dewey Decimal System guy, but a socialist named John Dewey. And they were very involved with the Frankfurt School in Columbia University in New York, which started in 1933, which was a school that was basically set up to socialize America, to not be social beings, but turn us from a constitutional free republic into a socialist country.
Yeah.
So these supposed teachers were the ones that were pushing this whole agenda. And there was a whole bunch of them involved, but the teachers union was very involved with this. What did they do? At one point, they started removing phonics from our schools. When they did that, the teachers who were teaching said, stop, no, this is that the kids aren't learning. They need the phonics. Don't remove the phonics. But the unions and all their, they think, wait a minute, they're a union. Why the heck are they making decisions on how to teach children? Shouldn't parents and teachers be making those decisions? Well, so them and their know-it-alls literally drove phonics out of the American educational system. It used to be, when we used phonics only, nobody'd ever heard of dyslexia. Once they removed the phonics, now you hear of dyslexia all the time, all these problems with dyslexia. Another thing, in America, we did not have anything called a functional illiterate in America. If we had people who were illiterate, it's because they hadn't gone to school. They had not been taught how to read.
Not attended school, period, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But now we have all these millions who attend school, and they are functional illiterates. Millions and millions. I was reading numbers today that was up to 24 million. Functional illiterates in a first world country, United States of America. Okay, that was by design. So they're purposely trying to undermine our educational system and undermine people so that they're unable to read well and to be entrepreneurial and all the wonderful things you were talking about earlier, how to debate, how to, all those things were a part of the American educational system. Under our founders, we used the Socratic method to get people to think deeply. We always had debate. We read the classics. We read the Bible. We had the Ten Commandments hanging on the classroom wall. We started our day with prayer. We, had a very strong system that led to greatness, that led to success. And we also based it on 3,500 years of historical evidence that when you have an alphabetic language, you use phonics to teach your people to read. It works every time. So what they do, they remove the tried and true. Like you said earlier, we should be using the tried and true. They removed it. They brought in educational quackery, and it didn't work. And now they keep it there. Now they're starting to sort of bring phonics back in, but they're mixing it with sight words and all this other nonsense that's making kids not learn to read. How did they mess up the math? Well, many years ago, you remember they brought in new math, and
New
all these
math. Oh,
parents
yeah.
said, stop it, stop it. And they took it out. Well, they brought it back in with Common Core. Common Core math is a nightmare. And I was still teaching when Common Core launched. Okay, you and your audience might not believe this, but this happened to me. I was teaching third grade at the time. They bring in Common Core. I think it was like 2015, something like that. It was during our lawsuit. And I'd always go back to work like 3 weeks or so before school started to get my classroom set up, do bulletin boards and get all the things ready for the kids. And we had meetings like 3 days before school started. We had these meetings where, we just get ready for the school year. Well, we're in this meeting 3 days before school starts, and the administration says to us, oh, all you teachers, you're going to have to start teaching something new. It's called Common Core. Okay, all the teachers freak out because great teachers have been working all summer, preparing all their lessons and getting ready to teach, right?
And throw that away.
Yeah, just throw it all away. Start with something brand new. And most teachers, people need to know, their personality is more go along to get along. They're nice people. They love to be around little kids. They're not warriors who want to fight every day. That's why it was so easy for the unions to take them over. So what happened? So I'm a troublemaker. I raise my hand. What's Common Core? Our administrator, this is the God's truth. She says to us, we don't know what it is. It hasn't been written yet. So this is worse than Obamacare. They had 2,600 pages that nobody read, but this had not been written yet, and we're supposed to teach it in 3 days. So I said the obvious, how can we teach something that hasn't been written yet? Oh, we don't know. And so all the teachers went home totally stressed out that night. I mean, can you imagine? You got to teach something that hasn't been written yet. You don't even know what it is. The next day, this is how they manipulate teachers. The next day we come back, the administration goes, oh, all your problems are solved. We have these 3 websites that you can use that are full of scripted lessons. They're already written. Everything's ready to go. They're all Common Core friendly lessons in every subject area. And we're going to give you the next 2 days to pore over these websites to figure out, what you want to teach. And oh, by the way, you can only look at these websites while you're at work. You can't look at them at home. You have to use a password, and you can't tell parents about it. You can't bring parents on this website.
Can't tell parents.
I'm going bing, bing, bing. Something's very wrong here. So I'm troublemaker again. How could we have 3 websites with scripted lessons already written on something that hasn't even been written yet? We don't know what Common Core is. Don't just ignore that crazy lady in the corner there who's asking these obvious common sense questions. They just put people like me down and tell the teachers, jump in there and learn how to teach this. I get on there, I start looking at these lessons. All of them are lessons on basically teaching children to hate our founding fathers, that they're nothing but a bunch of slave-owning evil men, teaching our kids to hate fossil fuels, and that you should never have fossil fuels. You should only have, windmills and solar. And then they never talk to the kids about the negatives of those things. It was unbelievable. It was leftist propaganda, and it's still in our schools. Common Core is all over the place. How did they get Common Core in? Well, we had No Child Left Behind, which I'm not saying was the greatest thing in the world, but we had No Child Left Behind. That had put a standard on schools. They had to reach certain levels, but each year they had to reach certain levels. Most of the schools around the country were not reaching those levels, so they were suddenly going to lose their funding or lose a lot of funding. Obama administration, along with the teachers unions who put him in office, come up with Common Core. The teachers unions are very proud of Common Core. Teachers don't know that because teachers hate Common Core. Your union loves it. So the unions and Obama, they put typical big old carrot with a ton of federal funding. If you take Common Core, you don't have to reach all those standards from No Child Left Behind, and you'll get all this money. School districts all over the country grabbed it as fast as they could because sadly our schools have become all about money, and our school districts are mismanaged because unions have way too much control, and they're controlling our school boards, our superintendents, our curricula, everything. So this is why our students can't read and write, or they're functionally illiterate, or they can't get a decent job, or they're not entrepreneurial anymore, or they can't think deeply or have a debate. It's all by design. Why would someone do that? Well, our founders gave us a little hint. Our American founders told us the only way to keep a free republic is with a well-educated and moral citizenry that can self-govern. So
Yeah.
self-governing only happens if you're well-educated and moral. So just look really carefully at what these people are attacking in our schools. They're attacking our kids' morals, and they're attacking their educational excellence purposely, dumbing us down and making us immoral. Why? So we won't be able to self-govern. So we won't be able to be a constitutional free republic anymore. So they can turn us into a socialist communist hellhole. So we better fight. If we want to stop this, we not only need to make these unions illegal again, like they used to be. Government unions were illegal in this country, but we also need to get our kids out of their horrible factories that are. I mean, it's just you're playing Russian roulette if you have your child in a public school these days. So it's a good time to pull them out.
Well, and I know that a lot of folks are alarmed by this. Some just like, we have people that are from generations where they experienced schools before a lot of this had taken hold and done what it did. And they're kind of concerned. They're desperate because now they know that they've got grandchildren going through this. Parents have children and they're like, yeah, but what choice do I have? What can I do about it? I think there's a lot on your website that also talks about what people can do and how they can see it for what it is.
Yes.
Right. And,
Yes.
and so that's why I wanted to make sure people know about forkidsinCountry.org and also to pick up your book because Standing Up to Goliath, there's 28 chapters in this, and there's little pieces in there that I think people will latch on to that'll impact them in a special way and start moving them down, not just on the learning curve, but towards the activism curve, where they start to realize if they just sit back and be docile little lambs, you'll be easily conquered. And even worse, your children actually will be conquered.
Yep.
They'll turn them into a bunch of woke socialists with their hands out, waiting for the government to come and save them and give them something, which is actually not how America works or has ever succeeded. And we can see other places in the world where they don't know how to solve any problems. In fact, half the time they wait for us to come in and solve it. Why? Because they've been taught that the government's going to fix everything for them or give them permission to do everything that they need to do, which it's not the American way.
Absolutely. It's not even the human way when you really think about it. We were created to thrive. We're smart human beings. I mean, we are the top of creation, right? We can think, we can talk, we can debate with each other, and our lives are just so much more rich and so much more full when we're educated and when we can have an opinion and make a difference. So yeah, this is huge. It's really important that people fight to not only to protect our children from this great evil, but to allow our children to learn and to grow and to thrive. And one thing I wanted to add about our website at forkidsinCountry.org, if people just click join the movement, it'll take them to a landing page that literally has everything they need in little buttons, and they could just click on the button. And the reason I brought this up is because you talked about options for parents. We have a button that says school options. And if you click on that, if you're a parent or a teacher, there are so many different options for you, for schools, for parents and teachers. Lots of options you may have never thought of before. It's not just private school, charter school, homeschool. There's so many other options. And we partner with an organization called Public School Exit, which is excellent. And we can help you to find those options, to connect with others in your community who are doing those options or would like to do it with you. Our children are way too important to continue sending them to these educational industrial complexes where they're not learning. They're actually being propagandized. And honestly, they're being propagandized against you, the parent, against the grandparent, against America, against truth, against God. And we just can't stand for that anymore. So until we can close those, get those evil unions out of the schools or close the system down, we need to start pulling our kids out. And I think, I was a single parent for 7 years. And if anybody would not be able to do anything, you'd think it was me. I had my son in a private school. How did I do that? I had the cheapest car I could possibly buy, that wasn't going to break down. I had a Toyota Camry. I never went out to dinner. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I didn't go buy tea at the, local tea house. I lived a very simple life. and my child was my priority. He came first. And so he was in a private school, and a really good school that taught him phonics. And so anybody can do it, and you can work together. If you're a grandparent, boy, you have, if your kids will let you, you have a lot of power to get in there and help with the homeschooling. You can have a lot of influence on your grandkids. So we can do it.
Wow, that is a great way to wrap up our show here, because you just proved once again that you're not only inspirational in what you did to stand up to the system, which people need that, adults need that inspiration, but a voice of optimism of what we can do and why it's so important. I really want to thank you for taking the time to come on our show here today and to share everything that you shared. And I hope you can kind of keep us informed and up to date, maybe come back on again and give us updates, because this is an ongoing drama. It's not over because a court case is decided. It's really just the beginning, right? And we've got a long way to go. But let's face it, COVID and everything that happened with that reminded a lot of people, or exposed to a lot of people, what was going on in schools and classrooms. And we've seen it here in Oregon. There have been high single digit, even double digit drop offs in people in the public schools leaving. And yet the schools say, well, we need more money. So
it's crazy. Thank God they're leaving and that they're waking up. It would be my honor to come back again anytime. And you're right that this is just the beginning. When the Janice case won, I remember during our case, I remember telling people who were all excited, I said, look, when we win, we celebrate for 30 minutes, 30 minutes. And then we keep on fighting, because this is a long battle. These unions have infiltrated us 175 years ago. This is the long march of the left we're fighting. And people were asleep for most of it. So now that we're awake, we got to get out there. We need to be warriors. And we can do it.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. Everyone, Rebecca Friedrichs for kidsincountry.org, and also get her book, Standing Up to Goliath. Thank you so much for joining us here, and we will stay tuned, and we'll be watching to see what develops in the future and have you on again. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Rebecca.
Thank you, Kevin.
Everyone, that was the captive audience for tonight. Another really great show and a great guest. And we want to ask you to share this show with everyone you can, because folks don't even know some of this that we talked about today, or they need this inspiration and that optimistic message that we can solve many of the things that confront us and help wake people up to what can be done. I wish everyone a great night. We'll be back tomorrow to be David and I talking about the headlines. There are so many of those every day, sharing with you news and opinion that you can't get anywhere else here in Oregon. Once again, have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow. Good night.